Happy Thanksgiving. Although we weren't here, we were in Atlanta and had Thanksgiving with our grandchildren. I tell you, is it just me or are all the children just smarter than we were? Because it seems like they know everything about everything, and I got an 11-year-old that's telling me that's not right, GW, and this is, so it's just, it's always a challenge. You got to go and be prepared to debate them, on certain things. But I hope everybody's football team won yesterday. Ours did not, okay? Just for clarity there. So we're gonna finish up. We've been in the Gospel of John. Not the whole book, but we've been identifying miracles in John's book that he wrote, that Jesus had participated in and that he'd participated in or others had participated in. And so we've learned a lot about the book from the perspective that John is just a little bit different. And for those of you that have been coming, you can just have heard this for the 6th or 7th time. But for those that are new, John's gospel is a little bit different than the other three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is a bigger emphasis, and literally in the original Greek, the word translates miracle. And there's a bigger emphasis on the event itself than what John places. John doesn't use the word miracle in his gospel. He uses what word? Sign. Right. And what did we say signs are? Like the restroom sign. What is that really? It's directions, right? And if you need it, it's right out there. Or the parking lot. So John uses from the original Greek a word that doesn't translate miracle. It translates into sign. Because what he wants, the miracle, the details, the aspect of it, what occurred is important, but it's not the main thing. It's supposed to be a direction pointing you to the theology of Jesus. What I mean by theology of Jesus is who Jesus really is. That he's come for us, to save us, to change us, to redeem us. That he's God's true Son. And that we will never spend time with God in heaven unless we've accepted Jesus as our Lord and Savior. So John wants the emphasis to be on that. So we've looked at 5 or 6 signs already, and we're going to be in the last one today. The big picture that we'll kind of close out on is this, that in this world today, and ever since the world started and sin came in through Adam and Eve, there's been 2 paradigms of life in this world. 2 paradigms. Now, you know what I mean by paradigm? People use it all the time now. It's a big systematic situation, so to speak. And they say a paradigm shift means all of a sudden that systematic system is no longer valid as much as is what it got shifted to. So you've got what we call the paradigm, or what everybody should really call it, is the paradigm of death. We have people living in the paradigm of death. Okay? And then there is the paradigm of life. And we can have people living in the paradigm of life, because you can bring that paradigm over and insert it in the death paradigm. What that means is that you're living your life like death doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And what you're doing in the paradigm of death is unshackling the bondage, the expectations, the desires, the me, the you, this, and all the things that come at us and cause us to have worry and pain and fear and anxiousness and stress, to the point where we just reach certain times in our life and we go, and I'm not talking about salvation now. I'm talking about you're already saved and you're still suffering And, think about it. We think about as we get older, the death's coming, and I talk about it, I want a paid weepers and gnashing of teeth people when I'm buried, so that they'll remorse me more. But maybe some of y'all would come anyway. But the paradigm of death holds you back and wants you to live like you're in a house and you're boxed in, and that's how you're going to live your life. And one reason it's like that is we allow it, but Satan wants you to view that, even for Christians, because it holds you captive in the house. And every now and then we walk out the window and go, oh yeah, there's something out there. When in reality, the patio doors should be open. We should be able to walk out of that house, walk out into that yard, and look up and live our life in the paradigm of life. So we're going to see 4 reactions today to this final sign. And their reactions either line up with the paradigm of death or the paradigm of life. Okay? So John chapter 11, we're just going to kind of dive in a little bit of background. 2 weeks ago, we finished with the guy that Jesus had healed, had opened his eyes, and he'd been born blind. He'd never seen. And like all the signs that occur and all the miracles, they go exactly against the religious system, the organization, the mentality that these people had. It's not that the laws had to be, it's not that the laws were, God gave them the laws, but it was how they viewed the laws and where they elevated the laws and how they responded to the laws. So there's there's a big tension between the religious system and the relationship concept with Jesus. A big tension. Now, it's easy for us to sit here 2,000 years later and go, well, I understand that tension, and I'm not part of that, and I'm part of Jesus. But when it was in real time, and Jesus had just shown up, and they're having to understand it, and all they've known for hundreds of years is the laws, and then the people see, human beings can screw something up better than anybody else in the world. And so they took the laws and elevated them and prioritized them over God's creation. He made us for His good pleasure, and they've prioritized following the rules over the existence of human beings. You see what I'm saying? So we're going to see reactions from the paradigm of death in this situation. So let's just kind of dive in. Jesus has slipped away because of all that tension that I just tried to articulate. And it's like I think I said a couple weeks ago, he's like a ninja. He just senses it boiling up, because what's in the back of his mind the whole time? My time is what? Short. My time has not yet come. My time has arrived. He is working on a timeline that he knows. They don't know, but then he starts sharing it with them, trying to say it's near, it's near, it's near. So that's why he would slip away. So he slipped away with his disciples from a threatening thing. They were literally picking up stones, ready to stone not just Jesus, but the disciples as well. And this is where we find Jesus today, after he slipped away. Chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary, and her sister, Martha. Now this is Lazarus' 2 sisters. And Jesus already knows these people. When he slipped away, he's not with them at this moment. He's with his disciples, but they're not that far away. But he already knows these people. He's already encountered them. He already loves them, and they already love him. And we'll see that played out. But that's the status when we're here. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now they're talking about Lazarus. And the sisters are going, we know you love Lazarus. We love you, Jesus. You love us. You love Lazarus. And so they send a word to him to say, like, with an anticipation, with an expectation that you would think that Jesus would come. They're connected. They're very close. I think it would be hard to say Jesus was any closer to the disciples than they were these people. Although Jesus had a God-ordained bigger plan for the disciples, I think his heart loved them just as much as the disciples that followed him. So you have this situation where he's sick, and then this is where it starts to get different, but it's good. Verse 4. When he heard this, that is when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, the sisters had sent somebody to get his attention. This is what Jesus has to say. This sickness will not end in death. No. It is for what? For what? For what? All right, hang on to that right there. Hang on to that right there. That is a mentality that fits in living your life in the life paradigm. That is not understood at all in living your life in the death paradigm. God's glory, well, yeah, he's up there, he's big, but I got issues, I got problems, this thing is serious. He's dying. That's the real world. We live in the real world. We don't live in that world. How many of you had people say that your whole life? They actually think they're spiritual, but they're not spiritual because they're emphasizing the paradigm of death. But this world doesn't really know how to glorify God unless they're living in this world, in the paradigm of death, through the paradigm of life. Okay, for God's glory, so that God's Son, who's God's Son? Yeah, the one communicating this may be glorified through it. So it's not just about glorifying God. We know that they're 3 in 1, 1 in 3, God, Son, Holy Spirit, in the individual things. But it's also validating and glorifying who? Jesus, right? Okay. So, continuing reading, verse 5. Now Jesus, did I skip something? No, I'm on track. My bad. Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed. Now, is he with them? No. He's some distance away. He stays right there, even though he loves them. That is something else that you would not find in the paradigm of death. Oh, they're dying. We got to get back. I'm not making fun of us. That would be me. Somebody's dying I love. I got to get back. But see, when you're living in the paradigm of life, it's not that Jesus doesn't love him. It's not that Jesus doesn't care. It's just Jesus knows that death isn't the winner. And death really has no power unless you give it the power. So he goes, I always lose my place when I walk away. I know y'all are going to tell me that. So he goes, now Jesus loved Martha, blah, 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 stayed there. Where am I, Barry? Verse 7. And then he said to his disciples, so where's the part where he didn't respond for 2 days? All right, y'all know all that then, good. All right, so he stays 2 extra days. Then he goes, let us, Jesus is talking to disciples, let us go back to Judea. In other words, let us go back to where we can access Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. Let us go back. Let us go back. All right. This is where we run into our 4 reactions. Okay? There's 4 different people that are going to react in a different way. Really a 5th one. The first one is the disciples. So you've got the backdrop. You know that Lazarus is very sick. You know that Jesus loves Lazarus, loves Mary and Martha. Yet he waits 2 days, and then he finally says, let's go. Now, you know why he waited the 2 days. He's waiting for Lazarus to be so dead that no one could ever say he wasn't dead. It's a validation thing with Jesus. But they don't know that, and if we'd have been there at that time, we wouldn't have known that either. See? All right, so let us go back. Now, here's the first reaction of the first group, and the first group is the disciples. How are they going to react? Are they going to live in the paradigm of death, living their life in it? Or are they going to live their life in the paradigm of life? And verse 8 starts out with it right off the bat. That famous word, what? But. All right, let us go. We waited 2 days. You don't understand why, but I do. Come on now, let's go, team. Let's go. Where are they going back to? Well, the same place that they basically got, the same area, the same general location where they had healed the guy with the blind and they were ready to throw stones and were throwing stones at him, so to speak, when they left. That's why they left. So they're going back, in the disciples' minds, they're going back to danger. See, and that's one thing that when there's danger, danger thrives in the paradigm of death. Because you don't want to do what? You don't want to die. So, danger, oh my goodness. But I'm not going to say danger, I'm going to say their reaction to this request is fear. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, don't you just love the Bible because it's almost like a movie dialogue? A short while ago, the Jews were trying to stone you. Now you want us to go back with you there? I mean, what, are you sure, Jesus? Are you okay? Did you drink too much wine? What, so stone you. And yet you, I love that, see, he says, let us go back to Judea. What are they clarifying? They said, yet you are going back? Okay, Jesus, we ain't going to take them stones. We don't know what we're doing, but we're living in a paradigm of death, and we're claiming we're living life, and fear has gripped us so tight that, you can go back. You sure you want to go back? Jesus answered them, and you got to love Jesus. He never really answers the question, but he answers the question. He just makes them think. Yet you're willing to go back? All right, verse 9. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? I'd be like, what? Did you hear us? They're going to try to stone us. You want to go back. I know you love Lazarus, but, and he goes with, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not what? Stumble. Get that word. I love that word, stumble. As in we're doing life and then we mess it up. We stumble all over ourselves. So, stumble. For they see this world's light. They won't stumble if they're walking in the light. Now, who is he talking about when it comes to the light? Himself. He's saying, if you walk with me, you're in the light. We go back, we're in the light. You are not going to stumble, as in nothing is going to happen to us because he had not ordained it. He has ordained something else that y'all haven't bought in on yet, but I'm trying to get you there, and that's the whole reason we waited 2 extra days. I want you to see who I am. So this is all a big picture situation, and they're just trapped in the little details, the little movie clips. They have no understanding of the beginning or the end or the concept. But the takeaway is they're responding in fear, even though they followed him almost at this point 3 years, and they've seen miracle after miracle, participated in miracle after miracle, and yet he knows that they're still living in a paradigm of death, or they would not be fearful. Okay, so he goes on and he says, he talks about the contrast if he's the light. It is when a person walks at night that they what? Stumble. For they have no light. That is us living in the paradigm of death. Any bondage, any exterior worldly pressure that causes us to doubt or to be fearful or to be afraid or to become hard-hearted or to become leaning into all the wrong things that attract you, your eyes and your heart and your mind. Anything like that is in darkness. And yet, if you're living your life in the paradigm of life, you don't allow that because you're so connected to what matters. It doesn't grip you and hold you back. But here's the truth. You never arrive. It's always grabbing for you. Always. And you have a sin nature. And when you have that sin nature, you're prone to sometimes misstep. And when you misstep, it's got you for a little bit, but it doesn't mean you can't overcome it. You just got to know what's happening, and you got to know where to look, and you got to know who to call on. All right, I slipped, God. I messed up, God. Forgive me, God. I'm glad you forgave me before I ever did it, because you've saved me and you're alive in my heart. I didn't mean to grieve the Holy Spirit, and it'll just let go. And you'll be back to where that is. But you remember, we got to live in the paradigm of death. That's not going to go away, but we're going to live our life like we're in the paradigm of life while we're in the paradigm of death. So Jesus is just explaining that, look, y'all are afraid, and your fear is allowing the paradigm of death to win. So verse, 11. After he had said this, and I don't know that they totally processed it, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus, so that means the disciples knew him as well, and it's not like these are strangers to these people. And the reason I keep emphasizing that is if they didn't know him, you could almost justify the disciples. Look, but we don't even know who they are. You've got to go back to danger for people we don't even know. But see, they all know them. It'd be like some of y'all, someone in here dying, and none of us, we were just too fearful to go to wherever he was or she was. All right, so after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. Now, asleep is the perfect word for how you live your life in the paradigm of life. It's just walking from the living room out onto the patio. It's just sleep. There really is no death. It's just a transition. He wants them to understand that, so he uses that term. But then he realizes that nobody in the paradigm of death, particularly people that don't know him, and they know him and they still don't, they don't understand asleep. They don't view it as transition. They don't view it as there is no real difference. What they see is they see a body, dead, lifeless. Death comes, issues come, struggles come. So they don't understand what he's saying. They actually literally think that Lazarus is what? Sleeping. Yeah. They think he's laying on the sofa, and just, took too much NyQuil. Well, we don't have to go back in danger. He just drank too much NyQuil, laying on the couch. Okay, so how many of y'all have ever had too much NyQuil? It will knock you to the ground. All right, verse 12. His disciples replied, this is so real. Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. That's why he took the NyQuil, Jesus. He'll get better. And Jesus is clarified. He doesn't say this, but this is what clarifies. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So, verse 14, Jesus realizes that. I think he probably already knew it, but what he was trying to do was emphasize that death is basically buy in on this. Death equal asleep and transition. Verse 14, so then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. He didn't have too much NyQuil. He is dead. D-E-A-D. Hear me? And for your sake, guys, not my sake, your sake. This is me investing in you for your sake, because our Father has big plans for you. And you can't be allowing fear to hold you in the paradigm of death, or you'll be worthless to the kingdom. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, as in there with Lazarus when he was sick and died. And why is he saying that? Because everybody would have thought Jesus would just be there to heal him, which then he's healed so many people now, and even the disciples, through the power of the Holy Spirit that Jesus had in his involvement with them, have healed people that are sick. So it would have just been almost an anticlimactic thing. If I'd have been there, they'd have said, touch him, or, Jesus, you can even speak it. I remember when you did that with a royal official, you just spoke it, and then sometimes you laid mud on their eyes, and so Jesus knows their mind would have just went to that. Yep, another miracle, just another miracle for the day. It's lost the emphasis. So Jesus has upped his game. I'm going to wait 2 days. I'm going to make sure he's dead. And I am glad, he knows he's dead, but I want the world to think he's completely dead. There's no way he could live. And then at the same time, he's making it clear that all of this is occurring in this way to change their thought process. All right. So I'm glad I was not there, so that you may what? Believe. What was another word we said that he never uses the word miracle. He only uses signs. He does not use the word faith through his entire book. He uses the word believe and believing, because it's movement. Faith is a noun. Faith is something that you go, yeah, I've got faith. Well, I've got a wallet. What does it do if it just sits there in my pocket, right? John wants something to be moving, because he feels like you never arrive with Jesus, which is true. You never get to the point where Jesus goes, there's nothing else I can do for you. How many of you ever heard the doctor say that? There's nothing else I can do for you. It's always moving. When we're in heaven, when we've transitioned, walked out in that yard and looked up, we're still going to be learning something about God and Jesus for all of eternity. And it'll never stop, because they're that vast, that big, that powerful, that just so amazing. We're just ants down here on the floor. It'd be like an ant trying to learn about AI or something like that. That's how distant it is. So anyway, he's just trying to do this. Now here, this is kind of funny. It's just kind of inserted, but so then he gives them all of this stuff, and I'm doing it for you, and it's so that you will believe. And also he knows what's coming. Lazarus is dead. Where's Jesus going to end up being? Dead, right? In the tomb, right? And so, we all know what happens here in Lazarus. We're in Christian world right here. So we all know what's going to happen. But it's actually for them to see that, so they have recall when it happens to Jesus. They go, yeah, but then there was Lazarus. He could do it, that kind of thing. So it's all of that together. And then as they're talking, and they left off with, let us, you're going back. And then Thomas jumps in and says, Thomas, now that's doubting Thomas, remember? He's piping up. Said to the rest of the disciples, let us go also, that we may die with him. Where's Thomas's mind? It's in the paradigm of death. See, he's got death on the brain. Stone us. It'll be brutal. I'm just going to say, let us go back, because if he dies, I want to be with him, and it'll probably kill us or some of us. You see how dominating death is in their thought process. And you know what? We should all relate to that very well, because we're human beings, and death dominates our thought. I don't mean we wake up every day and think about it, but it creates those reactions. So, here's what happens. Let us go. After that, Thomas just says, let us go, and we may die with him. So they leave together, disciples, Jesus. And they head to Lazarus. And they know Lazarus is dead, and we pick up here. And this is the second reaction that we see. The first reaction by the disciples was fear. Say that because we don't have it on the screen. Fear. That was the disciples. The second reaction we see is from an individual, and it's Martha. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, he knew that. He planned that. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, And many Jews in Jerusalem is where they'd gotten in a hotbed where they were picking up the stones ready to kill him for opening the eyes of that blind guy since birth and all the trouble that they went through. Those of you that heard that story, it was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's just a very debatable thing. So now Bethany is less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and this shows you how popular Lazarus, Mary, and Martha are, how much they're loved and liked and appreciated. Now, so many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. Jerusalem's just 2 miles away. It was much bigger. Whole bunch of folks are there. And that's all good because all those folks are going to see something that's going to happen that's for the disciples, but it's really for everybody's eyes, everybody's hearts, and everybody's ears. They're all going to be there to watch it. So this is John letting you know that it's a big group of people. This is not going to just be 3 people and the disciples. Verse 21, we meet Martha, and we see her reaction. It's not fear. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Martha knows a lot about Jesus. She's hung out with Jesus a fair amount of time. Not as much as disciples, but a fair amount of time. She sent word. She's the one that sent word. But Jesus didn't come until now. And Lazarus is dead. And so she says, if you had been here. You see, she's living in the paradigm of death. She thinks now that he's dead, it's over. Do you understand? It's over. It's not over, but he thinks it's over. She thinks it's over. So you can see that. What we're going to see is Mary's reaction is basically a resignation to the fact that there's nothing that can be done. Oh, well, he wasn't here. He wasn't here to speak it. He wasn't here to touch him. He wasn't here, so there's just nothing that can be done. It's just, I'm just going to resign myself to this. And so just listen to what she says. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It's all about your physical presence. You don't see any spiritual thought at all in that. It's like he's got to be here in the flesh or he's going to die. And you'd have been here. You'd have saved him with some, stuff you do, that kind of thing. You see where she is? I mean, it is what it is. All right, but then she goes, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Which kind of sounds like spiritual, but we see that it really isn't. It's just she's thinking it's too late. Martha answered, I know, or rather Jesus says this, your brother will rise again. Now, think about what's on her mind. If you'd only been here, and I don't know, and you weren't, and you're not, and he's dead, and he goes, your brother's going to rise again. She immediately goes to her theology. She's a good Jewish girl. She knows the Old Testament. They didn't call it that, but she knows the law. She knows the things. So she goes back to what she's heard recited in Daniel and many other books of the Bible that they didn't really have the books, but they had the stories and the writings. You get the point. So she goes, when he says, your brother will rise again, verse 24, Martha responds this way, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. See, they already believe that. So she's just going there with it. Oh yeah, he's gonna rise on the last day. I already know that. That's where I'm coming up with this resignation type thing, this resign. She's resigned herself to nothing is going to change the current situation, but I know you, Jesus, and I love you, and only if you had been, but it's okay. And I know he's going to rise again, and I do believe in you, but yet all this death paradigm is still impacting her response. So Jesus says this, and it's the closeout in verse 25 that Jesus is just point blank. We should all have to deal with this question. This is what he says to her thing about, I know the resurrection at the last day. We'll all be glorious one day. Verse 25, Jesus says, I am the resurrection. So don't be belittling it. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live. You hear that, Martha? Live. Even though they die. Now that's just like, wah, wah, because what Jesus just did is walk over and take that paradigm of life and plunk it right down in the paradigm of death. Even when you believe, whoever believes in me will live. And even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will what? Never die. And this is the question. He just throws that back down to her, mingled that paradigm, and then he goes, do you believe this, Martha? Do you believe this, Frank? Boom! Gail, do you believe this? You know, are you still wrestling in the paradigm of death? Or do you believe this? Do you believe I'm the resurrection? Do you believe I'm the life? Do you believe in me? Because if you do, live it. And live that life in that death, because death has no control over you at all. That's what he's saying to her. She comes back in verse 20 and says, yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into this world. So she's got the factual belief, but she still doesn't, she's over there kind of not arguing, but reciting theology to Jesus. And she clearly just resigned herself to the fact that Lazarus isn't coming back. Okay? That's where her mind is. He's dead. If only you weren't here. I'm accepting it. I love you, and I believe who you are. But she doesn't see any power in it. Okay. Verse 28. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister. So she's tired of being told, you're too much focusing on the death. So fear for the disciples, and what for her? Resignation, right? Say that. Resignation. She has resigned herself to believe that it's too late. Okay. So she goes back, and says, now we're introduced to Martha. And she tells Martha this. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. Verse 29. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to Jesus. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village. So you can get that picture. She's jumped up out of their house and running to him, but was still at the place where Martha had met him, where they were having their dialogue. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, and those are the Jews that all came to mourn and care and show love and support to Mary and Martha and over Lazarus' death. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly Mary gets up and goes out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. They don't really know that she's headed towards Jesus. I don't think they know that Jesus is there yet. All right, verse 32. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, what? Yes, Lord, if you had been here. What did Martha say? If you had been here, Jesus. And there's Mary. If you had been here. But Mary's response is totally different than Martha's. Martha's is more Martha had a different personality. I'm not throwing stones at Martha's personality. She was one of these people that was a move-on person. Okay, I know, and yes, I believe in you, but you weren't here, and now he's dead, and it's I'm looking forward to that resurrection in the future. It's all good, and I'm gonna go get married now. Okay, Jesus, I'm gonna go get married. She's just resigning it out. But Martha is totally different, and how's she gonna respond? Let's just let the text tell you that. But she starts out with the same question. If you had been here, if you had been here, it's a statement, but basically saying, why weren't you here? Because that's what would make the difference, your physical presence. When Jesus saw her weeping, verse 33, and the Jews who had come along with her weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and in trouble as well. Now, this is what's happened. Fear for disciples, resignation for Martha, and for Martha, and for Mary, the primary emotion. These are reaction motions. See, their reaction, fear. Her reaction, resignation. Mary's reaction was sorrow. Tremendous sorrow. Overwhelming sorrow. Because that's who Mary was. She carried her heart around, you know. I mean, it's just like, Martha is a harder woman. I don't mean that ugly. We all know strong, harder women. Just suck it up, you know. But she wanted Jesus to know, I wished you'd have been here. But, you know, I'm going to resign myself that we'll all be together, and that's good enough for me right now. But Martha is not coping with it. She's crushed. She's devastated. Excuse me, Mary. Mary is crushed. She's devastated. So, when Jesus sees her weeping, and also the Jews that had come weeping, and how deeply he was very moved in his spirit and troubled. So Jesus says, where have you laid him? Where have you laid him? So I want you to see something here. Well, let me just read this last little part of 34. He asked, come and see, Lord. Mary's saying, come and see, Lord. Come and see Jesus. Come and they replied, and they replied, Jesus wept. So you got Jesus who's moved in spirit, deeply troubled, and weeping. And you've got Martha, Mary. I hate the M&M. Mary is a basket case of sorrow. So her initial reaction is tremendous sorrow and crushing. This reaction that Jesus has, troubled, moved in spirit, and weeping, is also a reaction. Now remember, Jesus knows all about what's going on here. All about what he's trying to show them. All about why these people need to see what's going to happen, particularly the disciples. But yet, Jesus reacts to this situation in his humanity, in his 100% humanity. That's why he's moved. He knows the outcome. He's moved over how moved they are. So that, you know, you can see his humanity coming out, watching the Jews and watching Mary weep and cry and how devastated they are. That, if any text in the Bible shows and causes you doubt that Jesus wasn't 100% human as well as 100% God, then I don't know what does. And he's allowing that part of him to express itself. So in a way, we can say fear for the disciples. We can say resignation or resigning herself from Martha. We can say great sorrow for Mary. But we can say Jesus responding in his humanity as well. It's his initial reaction to this. Particularly after he sees Mary's response and all those Jews there crying and wailing and everything. Then Jesus said, or rather the Jews, because they see Jesus weeping, that he's troubled in spirit and everything. The Jews said, see how he loved him. Talking about Jesus now. Jesus is outwardly reflecting something that they're noticing. But some of them, and this is the dynamic in the picture, said, could not he, who opened the eyes of the blind man. Now see, that's the Jews that came from Jerusalem that saw the guy that was blind from birth and saw all that tension and all that carrying on and all those stones getting picked up and all that. So they're aware of all this. But see, so some are going, oh, he loved them so much, he's crying, he's weeping. And they don't know anything about the resurrection or anything like that. That's just not on their mind. But then some, go, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? So all of this stuff, all these comments, all these mentality, all of this stuff is coming from a paradigm of death. Every bit of it. Because they can't let go of it. That's all they know. Death is the driver of all of it. And when you think about it, we live our lives kind of like that, right? We've only got so much time. We got to make the most of it. But that's just not how we're supposed to view it. All right. Jesus wants more. So we see his initial reaction, humanity. So that's 4 reactions. Or is it? 4 reactions. Now this is the 5th reaction. Jesus once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And he says, "Take away the stone." Now, look at here. Here's another but. But, Lord, who says this? Martha. Oh, practical Martha. We'll get together in the resurrection in the end. The sister of the dead man. I don't know why John felt like adding that, but she wants to make sure you know that Lazarus is dead. He's dead. By this time, there is a bad odor. So this is resigned Martha now getting practical. It's going to stink. You open that up, it's going to stink. We'll get together with him at the resurrection in the end. It's almost like that's what she's saying. Why are you doing this? For he's been dead 4 days, Jesus, and I don't know what took you so long. If only you had gotten here. But then Jesus said to Martha, because she's piped back in. Mary's still over there devastated. Did I not tell you? That's kind of harsh, isn't it? Like, Martha, I about had my full of Martha today. Did I not tell you that if you what? Believe, you will see the glory of God. So in verse 41, that shut down Martha. You can just see her like this. 41, he goes, so they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I knew that you always hear me. What a statement. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. That's everybody else. Because nobody else seems to understand it. So it's for the benefit of everybody there but him. That they may believe that you sent me. Again, this is about the glorification of God and the glorification of Jesus in his role and purpose here. So he speaks that out loud. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice. What did he say? Lazarus, come out. Say it one more time like you've been watching the whole thing instead of sleeping. That's what I'm talking about. Touchdown, Auburn. Oh, my bad. Never mind. Anyway, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. Now, I want you to listen to 44, how much detail and embellishment and crazy details and how much emphasis they placed on this sign, that John placed on this sign. The dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. That's all he says. Why does John not go into all this stuff? Because it's not about the miracle. It's about what just happened and who did it. Do you see? So here's the thing. We've been talking about paradigms. We see the reactions of the death paradigm as fear, as resignation that we really can't live life without letting death be a big player in it. You just resign yourself to that. Or it's just sorrow. Great sorrow occurs in the paradigm of death. Great fear occurs in the paradigm of death. Resignation occurs in the paradigm of death. And humanity occurs in the paradigm of death. But we see here this last response by Jesus when he finally said, take away the stone, etc., etc. This is why I came. This is what my purpose is, and this is for your benefit. We see Jesus as the Son of God, not Jesus in humanity. The Son of God. And the Son of God says, Lazarus, transition, wake up. You are asleep. Wake up. Come out and walk. And he lives longer, but I'm going to tell you something. Lazarus does die. But he transitions. And all of us transition if we have the Spirit of God. It's not that. That's not the question. The question is, we can't seem to enjoy that status of living life, the life paradigm, by truly living in it and bringing it over to the death paradigm. That way, we don't have fear. That way, we don't really have sorrow. That way, we don't get confused about theology and just resigning ourselves to, oh, well, one day. We have humanity, but at the same time, he really wants us to live our life like we're already in heaven. What are we supposed to do? What are we going to be doing when we're in heaven? We're going to be what? Praising and worshiping and glorifying and praising and worshiping and glorifying and who all knows what. And really the takeaway from this is that John wants people to see that you can live as a believer and not be held back by the paradigm of death. You can live real life in this stage. It's just that you never master it because you got sin nature and you got Satan. So you just got to put on that armor and stay focused in the Word and see things through the spiritual instead of the physical. Okay? All right, so here's where I want to start. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I want to read some words from a song. And he's going to play it in the background just as we do it. And here's what, this is not a call to Jesus, okay? I mean, it can be, if that's where your heart is, if you don't know the Jesus that I've talked about this morning. But what this is if you're struggling and you relate to some of the things that are holding you back and keeping you in that death paradigm mentality and not living the life paradigm truly within the death framework, if you've got bondage, if you've got struggles, if you've got issues, if you've got health, if you've got marriage, if you've got finances, if you can add the you got, whatever it is, there's nothing, but all of those things hold you down. And you have to just trust God enough and believe enough and stay connected enough to where the Holy Spirit says, don't you worry about it. Don't you worry about it. Just look up and walk out and look up and see me and know that I'm here. We can defeat the paradigm of death in our personal life. It's not easy. And you fight the battle every day. But if you're struggling with stuff now that are holding you back, I'm going to ask that you just come forward. And I'm going to ask Frank to come up, and Kristen, and Leslie. And y'all can get up and walk now. Rise and walk. I'm going to ask them to come up, and if you just want to express something to one of them, you can certainly do it to me, but I'm giving you an option of all these personalities, so you got whoever you would want to approach. And if no one comes, it's okay. But while this is playing, I want you to listen to this. These are the words of this song. Lord, turn us his face towards you and give you peace. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and this is beautiful, and your children, and their children, and their children. May the presence go before you, and behind you, and beside you, all around you, within you. He is with you. He is with you. He is in the paradigm of death. He is alive. He is well. His presence is there. And He wants us and our children and their children and their children to experience the life that Jesus calls us to in this paradigm of death. In a way, we defeat death by living like this in this moment, in this world. It's almost like, yeah, I'm in a paradigm of death and it does not hold me back. So if something's holding you back, come up here and pray with somebody today and ask them to help you and share your heart.